As you know, malaria is one of the most important diseases in the world. Estimates vary, but there's still probably about 500,000 deaths per year from malaria around the world. And I'm sure you all know that by far the main area of the world with the malaria problem is Africa. And you see on this map, the areas that are yellow and red are the highest transmission areas for malaria in the world. And you can see, I'm not sure if my pointer works for you, but you can see that Cameroon is yellow and red. There is a lot of malaria in Cameroon, of course, and I don't need to tell you that. Just another way to look at the burden of malaria in Africa. This slide was from some years ago when the number of deaths was somewhat higher, but it showed that the ratios are the same. The vast majority of deaths from malaria around the world are in children under 5 years of age and are in Africa. In dark blue, you see the proportion of the deaths that occur in Africa. So malaria is primarily a disease of African children. It, of course, is a serious problem in many other parts of the tropics around the world, but the numbers are much, much greater in Africa. There's some reason for optimism. For about the last 10 years, we've been talking about the good news for malaria. There is good evidence for decreasing incidence. Probably we have about half as much malaria in the world as we had 15 or 20 years ago. Those are rough estimates, but there's reason to think they're true. There's been particularly good progress in some areas. In Africa, the areas you see with red dots on my map are places where there's been remarkable success in decreasing malaria, though these are primarily at the fringes of transmission in Africa. Places like the parts of South Africa that have a little bit of malaria, southern Zambia, Zanzibar, which is an island, so relatively easy to control malaria, Gambia, a small country with a lot of resources to control malaria. So there have been successes, even greater successes outside of Africa, where malaria has gone way down in various parts of the Pacific, but even in China, most malaria in China now is imported malaria rather than spread locally. And Sri Lanka eliminated malaria just a couple of years ago. So there have been some great successes. But it's been harder to see success in the middle of Africa, the heartland where there's so much transmission. And most recently, unfortunately, things that seem to have slowed down. The WHO puts out a World Malaria Report every year, and they come out right at the end of the year in December. And the report in December of 2017 was the first report in years that wasn't completely optimistic. It wasn't just saying things are getting better, let's keep working hard. It said we're at a crossroads. So they showed this signpost to demonstrate that we are at a crossroads. Things aren't clearly getting better anymore. If you look at the number of cases, can you see my pointer? No? Do you see this arrow? Yes, I see. I see. Thank you. Okay. I also can see that you can hear me. Okay. So the number of cases of malaria was going down, down, down. But in the last 2 years, 2016 was the last year where we have numbers. The cases seem to have increased a bit. Malaria deaths have pretty much not changed. I can also say that these numbers are estimates. There are many different ways to come up with estimates. And there is some controversy now where there are other means of modeling that lead to numbers that are actually quite a bit higher than this. And so the WHO maybe is understating the problem, but regardless, we don't see the improvements we were seeing 5 or 10 years ago. Funding is flat. In most high burden countries, funding has actually decreased in recent years. And as you can see, the dollars spent on malaria are still very low. In a number of very high burden countries, $2 per person per year. Not enough to allow us to really make continued advances. And particular concerns, as we will talk about later, are drug resistance and insecticide resistance.